Welcome to KUMC Cultivate, a podcast highlighting community members engaged in supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion on and around the KU Medical Center campus. KUMC Cultivate is brought to you by the School of Health Professions Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We strive to facilitate understanding and acceptance of persons with diverse abilities, cultures, and ethnicities through education and support.
My name is Bobby Late.
Today we have Antoinette Redmond with us. She is the Program Manager for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Hi, Antoinette. Thank you so much for joining on behalf of the School of Health Professions Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Thank you for being a part of this podcast, KUMC Cultivate. Through the podcast and this interview, it is the hope of the School of Health Professions Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that we are able to raise awareness and visibility of campus and local community members actively supporting and educating others in the acceptance of persons with diverse abilities, culture, and ethnicities. We are so excited to hear more about your personal story and your work with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Antoinette, before I go any further, would you like to share a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Of course. Thank you so much to the School of Health Professions for inviting me to participate. Like Bobby had said, my name is Antoinette Redmond. I have the honor and privilege of being the wife to Brandon and mother to Brandon Jr. and Braden, and we are welcoming our baby girl any day now. And I love serving in our community and learning more and helping to really advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Kansas City community.
Thank you so much. I love to hear about your family and how that makes you and your uniquenesses. Could you share an experience when you realized your race, ethnicity, or abilities were not equitably recognized?
Sure. So I am Black and Filipino, and I was primarily growing up, I was around my mom's side of the family who is a Filipino American heritage. And I remember them sharing a story when I was about 3 or 4 years old, where they told me I was Black and Filipino. And I was hysterical. And I wouldn't stop crying because I wanted to be Filipino and Filipino only. And one of the things that realizing going back and really processing that moment. And it really brought to the forefront when you're just surrounded by a homogeneous family or a homogeneous community, you want to belong. And I wanted to belong to the Filipino culture, the Filipino heritage. And I didn't want to be seen as other. And you know, having that intersectionality of being Black and Filipino, that's why I really wanted to, I really just wanted to be Filipino. And so it was a discussion that, you know, again, my family, my mom really walked me through, and she tells me the story about saying like, no, like you're not, like your dad is Black and I'm Filipino. You know, we, you know, in the 3 to 4 year old brain, we made you, that's why you're both, reassuring my identity. By, you know, you're beautiful, like the way you are, like we still love you. We don't see you as anything different, but our daughter, or like for my grandparents or my aunts and uncles, is our niece or our granddaughter. And so that was really one of the first times that race really was brought to the forefront. And they still joke about it today, and definitely still discussed.
Thank you for sharing that experience. I can definitely hear the theme of identity and connecting with others and that sense of belongingness in what you shared with us. What has come out of that experience? What have you, as you've grown and you've changed and you've seen, you know, more of the world in life, what has come out of that?
Mm-hmm. In particular with that experience, it's really shown me that people deserve the right to identify with who they are, whether that is racially, whether that is religiously, whether that is sexual orientation. When we think about the whole umbrella of diversity, that is really one of the biggest lessons that has resonated with me. And that on the other side of the coin, the thing that really resonates with me is that I can identify as a Black and Filipino woman, but to other people, I may just be considered a Black woman. I may be considered a Asian woman. Like other people will then also put definitions on me, define me, but being strong in who I am, recognizing that equally the cultures that make me me is equally important, and not one weighs more than the other, and really embracing both cultures, and really embracing the traditions that have been passed down through our family has really allowed me to, I want to say, flex in between both groups and be able to relate. And as we look at this past year with the pandemic, and we look at all of the social justice unrest, I find myself caught right in the middle with all of the anti-Asian hate that's going on, and the fear of the elderly being beaten and targeted. I lived that experience with my grandparents. Even just taking a walk around the neighborhood, I was fearful. And I asked questions of like, can you go early in the morning? Can who else can you go with? Do you have to go right now? Then when we think about all of the social justice unrest and even the killings of unarmed Black children, Black men, Black women, I also find myself in that in that moment, as well as raising raising biracial kids and having a Black husband, with fearing of, okay, it's getting dark out. Let's stay. I'll go get it. I'll go get the whatever we need from the grocery store. I'll go run that errand real quick. And then looking at that and realizing that it's not just in the night. It's not just when it gets dark. It's all day, every day, and carrying the stress and carrying that fear that something can happen to my family because of their race has really came to the forefront and been exposed. In particular, it's always been there, but in particular this past year.
Yeah, you shared so much that has rang true for us over the last year, and it definitely just didn't happen in the last year. There's a history behind it. Your work in the Office of the DEI and personally has given us a platform to be able to make change. And I know my involvement with that, with the School of Health Professions, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, but also the Office of the DEI, I've seen so many strides forward for progress and a lot of great conversations happening. Can you talk about how you can get others to get involved to promote inclusivity?
So when we talk about promoting inclusivity, I think it's important to identify where you are in your educational journey of understanding even the term of when race was even created. Because for me, there was so much that I did not know about American history, about colonization, that I didn't dig deeper until it really hit home for me. I attribute my learning journey to my husband so much because there was a lot that he's taught me in the past 7 years that we've been together that I just didn't understand. And I was coming from a really ignorant place of, if you work hard, you can get X, Y, and Z. If you do this, you can get here. Without recognizing that systemic racism is real. There are groups of people, in particular, Black and Brown people, who do not have the same opportunities of just working hard and moving forward. And what does that look like? What does systemic racism look like? How does that show up in our educational system, in our housing system, in our banking system? Where are places that people, whether that's laws that have been put in place or policies that have been put in place that have been excluded? And so for me, it was a hard reality to sit back and really go through our history in America to realize that, wow, there were strategic and intentional laws that were put in place to truly exclude. And that's why when we look at different groups of people, why there is a wealth gap, why there is an educational gap. And I believe it's important to, one, start by educating yourself. And this was reiterated in Dr. Samari's and Dr. McGee's message to our campus yesterday. By educating yourself, demonstrating inclusion, and then supporting our community diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And that's how we really move forward. That's how you are able to promote inclusivity. That's how you're able to change not only your personal community, but all of the different communities that you touch with your involvement.
I love how you highlighted in your response the need for education. Just like you, over this past year, I've been more interested in making sure that I am educated on some of the topics and the tensions that are happening, because I felt like I didn't truly understand. So one of the things that I took advantage of was a community conversation event that was offered through the Office of the DEI. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other activities that are on campus where people could educate themselves and start to learn more, similar to what you're talking about, so we can be more informed when we're making policies or at the table in a discussion like this?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that excited me the most about coming to KU Medical Center is all of the amazing people here that are like yourself, wanting to learn more, but also wanting to facilitate these types of discussions. And so the discussion that you are referring to is the Turning the Page, which is under community conversations and led by Dr. Christina Bridges. And so right now, we're processing the book of Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Beverly Tatum. And it's broken down into chapters. And you don't necessarily have to have read the book to participate in that discussion, but it's just a really great way to process and to educate yourself and really continue the journey of learning. And so that's one way to get involved. We also have amazing people who contribute to our different programming that is co-chaired by Kimberly Connolly and also Dr. Jeff Riddell, who will help set up different heritage months. So like in February, we celebrated Black History Month. In May, we're gearing up for Asian Pacific Islander American Month. June, we're heading up Pride Month. And then we have September, October, Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month. And then in November, we have Native American Heritage Month. And in each of those months, it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from people who identify in one of those heritage of their perspective, and hear their lived experiences of what it was like growing up, what it's like as a student here at KUMC, or a faculty member or a staff member. We also have a research day, which is one of my favorites, to learn about what are all the amazing things that are being done by people who identify the group, identify in that ethnic group, or people that are doing research for that particular community. And so those are just a few ways that you can get involved. We have a listing of all of our events on the KUMC events calendar. You also are able to join our DEI listserv. So if that is something that interests you, please send us an email at kumcdei@kumc.edu. And that's a great way for you to be able to connect with our campus and see all the amazing things that are taking place.
I'm so glad that you shared a way to connect for the listeners to be able to integrate or take advantage of some of the opportunities that the Office of the DEI puts forth for us on campus. I'm guessing the listeners probably are thinking that how we engage with these activities may be a little bit different because of the COVID-19 pandemic and our presence on campus. And I know that may affect probably the Heritage Month, the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Is there differences that on how we can interact with that activity? Is it online, or is it, can you walk through the overpass between HEB and or Major? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in the past, we had our biographical posters featured in the HEB, but with COVID, that really shifted how we are able to be present on campus. So our biographical posters have moved to online. So going on our KUMC DEI webpage is where you will be able to see those. Also, right now, we are planning for Zoom sessions. So like for Asian Pacific Islander Month, all of those are on Zoom and will be on Zoom. With June, we're turning to our leadership here at KUMC to be able to let us know what is most appropriate and most safe. So right now, everything is virtual and being offered through Zoom, but we hope to return and maybe do some hybrid events when it is deemed safe to do so.
I'm so glad that you're planning for the return, at some point soon in the future. I am anxiously awaiting the ability to be on campus more, as I'm sure so many others are. You've given us so many great things to think about as far as where do we go from here with events. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, either personally or from the Office of the DEI, that you feel our listeners need to know?
Mm-hmm. So this is me as an individual speaking, and it really stood out to me. And Mama Hakima, who is the executive director at Uzazi Village, said this to me several months ago, and it still rings very true. And her comment was, if you are not in true relationship with someone who is different from you, you will never begin to understand that person or that community. And so what that meant for me was, when we think about a relationship, you're going to have the happy times where you're celebrating, you're just being in community with one another. But then you're also going to have that friction where you're not going to agree on everything. You're going to have to work through some conflict. So if you are not in a relationship with someone who identifies as a different race, identifies as a different religion, identifies as a different sexual orientation, you will never begin to understand that person, let alone that group, the group of people who may identify in that group. And so I would encourage you to seek out relationships with different people to help with this educational and learning process. And know that you are not alone. You are not the only person that, may have homogeneous friends, that everybody looks like you, they grew up like you, same socioeconomic status as you. You are not the only one. This is something that all of us have to continue to work towards. And as we continue to work towards a unified community, we're going to not only create a better world for us, but also the children that are going to come up behind. And so I would just encourage you to really stretch yourself, lean into uncomfortable situations when we are talking about building relationships with people that are different from you. Because again, that's where the true learning happens, and that's where the true shift and creating a truly unified community will come.
Wow, Antoinette, you've given us such wise words and so many ways that we can get involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I like to say, making this world a better place. And I love that you also brought in the children of the future, people of the future, the youth of the future, to take care of what will definitely take years of continued work to make progress. Thank you so much, Antoinette, for your continued work in this area and also for being a part of this podcast today. I don't want to take away your chance to leave any lasting remarks. Are there anything else that you'd like to share before we finish for today?
I would like everyone to know that the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, myself, Danielle, and Geraldine are here for you. Everything that we do is to support KUMC. So if you have any suggestions, you need someone to talk to, we are here for you. And we are here with open arms, and we are more than happy to assist you on this educational journey. So I thank, again, Bobby, for inviting me to come and participate in this podcast. And I'm looking forward to learning and growing with everyone.
Thank you so much again. It was a pleasure to get to talk to you today.